All right, we are going to be talking about that scary feeling when you are in front of your keyboard and you're starting to type away at the things that you want to get across in your offers. When you're doing your listings, whether on your own website, on Amazon, on eBay, wherever. We're really going to be focusing more on Amazon in this conversation, but it is going to be something that could be very helpful with thinking about how do you want to represent your brand and what do you want to get across in a way that's going to be impactful to get somebody to take enough action to pull their credit card out of their wallet, or at least hit the add to cart button and you get a sale. So definitely awesome conversation we're going to have here. If you find it to be helpful, please consider subscribing and also hit that little like button because it really goes a long way in letting the algorithm know that this video is helpful for you. So I'd also love to know, what did you learn about? Leave it in the comments. What is the big takeaway you got out of this conversation? So without further ado, let's kick it into the interview. Okay, so have you ever gone to your computer and you start saying, I'm going to type in my title, my bullets, my description, and you've got all these ideas, and then you just stare at the cursor kind of flashing at you, not sure, what am I supposed to say here? Or you start second guessing that what you've already written, does that make sense? Do people actually like it? Is it converting? Or if it is converting, could it convert better? And you start second guessing yourself. If you're like that, you're not alone. I do that all the time. And I know lots of people that that's what they do, because one of the scariest things in the world is actually going in front of a keyboard and actually having to put like letters and words on there. So I'm really excited today to have someone that knows quite a bit about words and making it into a cohesive brand. Very excited to have Emma Schermer Tamir from Marketing by Emma to talk to us about all things words and brands. So Emma, thanks for coming on Maximizing E-commerce.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you for having me. And I love the way that you introed that because, believe it or not, no matter how many years you do this, it still feels really scary to sit down and stare at a blank screen and figure out how am I supposed to pull these words out of my head and make it into something that people will be engaged with.
Yes, and if people haven't checked out the book War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, you should definitely listen to that, because I mean, he's a very accomplished writer and he talks about that very thing and all the little procrastinations that people do along the way to avoid like typing stuff. So if whether you're a newbie on e-commerce or you've been doing it for years and you find yourself having trouble with the writing stuff, or you magically keep finding all these other tasks to do instead, you're not alone. It's because it's the war going on in our heads. So let's just talk a little bit about how you got into this battle of head trash meets writing.
I love the way that you said that. Writing was just something that I always did since I was a little girl. And at first it was just, I guess, a way for me to explore my creativity. And then as I got older, I just I was good at it. And I think when you're good at something, you gravitate towards it
Right.
even more. And so it was just a way that I felt like I could express myself, everything from journaling, which is, something very personal, but a great way to really get inside of how you think and feel about a situation, to being able to clearly and compellingly express an opinion for a college paper. And
Right.
then as I sort of started to develop more professionally, I started to get tasked with more marketing writing types of pieces every
Mm.
time that an employer would realize that I had some writing skills. And so at first it was more of just, okay, well, I can do this. And then as time went on and as I was exposed to more and more of those different types of projects, I started to really find a great interest in marketing writing itself. And then that's how I ended up getting where I am today.
Gotcha. What kind of stuff did you write about as a little girl? You don't have to go into what was actually in the journal.
Oh gosh. Well, I really loved there. So there was like Harriet the Spy, and then some other books like that. There were
Okay.
about girls that were very observational, and so a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
stuff that I did was quite observational. But I've
Mm.
just always found that, particularly with journaling, if I'm feeling just confused or overwhelmed or stressed, and I can't put my finger on what's going on. Somehow when I sit down with a pen and paper, and it's totally different than if I'm trying to type, but when sitting down with a pen and paper, it's like I unlock a part of myself that isn't accessible otherwise. And I always walk away from those experiences feeling greater clarity, more control, um, and just a better sense of what I need to do when I'm feeling lost. So that's a little deep, but
No, that was good. So, I mean, really what it comes down to is it's therapeutic, it sounds like, for you writing. And so you said as you went along, you started like going from like kind of the therapeutic part about like, I was just jotting down some notes there for follow-up questions. So you kind of went with the therapeutic part, and then as time went on, it kind of adapted into like, writing for college term papers with, whether somebody went to college or they just had to write stuff for English class in 10th grade. We can all kind of relate to that, feeling of like, I have to write something, so I'm going to play Nintendo, which I probably did in high school or in college. Maybe I found all kinds of other things that were totally not what I should be doing when I know I had to write something for English literature or whatever it was I was writing for. So as time goes on, you're trying to write stuff. So really the point is here, as maybe you're doing the observational stuff, that's kind of fun, right? Like, it was something you're passionate about, but then as time goes on, did you find yourself like when you're writing term papers or stuff that was now diving into marketing, that it was a little bit more of the flashing cursor, or were you still just kind of jotting stuff down as you were going
so
free
I
flow?
think combining the skill with words with this kind of insatiable curiosity is really, I think, what has allowed me to stay interested and continue to pursue this particular direction with my life. So I'm very nerdy, and in school, I actually really loved being able to distill my ideas and have a strong viewpoint. And so that then transitioning into marketing, curiosity is such a great skill to develop, even if you don't feel particularly curious, because it can help you to start to think about things in the way that you need to in order to be able to create writing that's going to help you achieve your goals. So, for example, if you're able to get really curious about who you're trying to sell to, that's
Mm,
going to make it much more effective than sitting down and thinking what words are going to sound good. So it's really
mm,
trying to almost in some ways play a role, like kind of like acting
mm-hmm.
on paper. And the more convincing you are with acting is when you both have a really deep understanding of who you are in that role, but also who you're trying to communicate with, and then what the larger goal is within that piece of art that you're creating. So it's very multi-tiered.
Okay, gotcha. So it's not just type. You're putting in some curiosity. I like that framing of it. You're being curious about like what would the customer want. So what are those kind of questions you're asking yourself? Now we're starting to go from journaling as a kid to now marketing writing. So what are those kind of observational? Because I'm sure there's kind of a lot of parallels that one might not think on the surface, but there's some parallels in how you're writing journaling as a kid, and maybe how you're doing copywriting with some of your curiosity. So what are that curiosity that you're now bringing to marketing writing?
Yeah, so just that wanting to know about human nature. So why are
Mm,
people doing the things they're doing? What is making them want this particular brand compared to another brand? What is
mm,
it about this product that's going to make someone incredibly excited and then somebody else maybe really turned off? So all of those nuances, and I mean so much of it is rooted in human psychology, and that's where I think marketing writing and just marketing in general gets so fascinating,
hmm.
because we don't even understand why and how our brains do a lot of the things that they do, but there are some general rules and principles that you can use to follow, and by knowing those different mechanisms, you're able to create marketing writing that does those things that you need to do to sell your products
Great.
or
So,
services or
right, exactly. Whatever it is, whatever you want people to go from um, not having your product, your service, whatever, to pulling their wallet out and making a purchase. So, what do you think are those things going on in people's heads when they're making that decision?
so
Should I not?
right. So there are so many things. I mean, one of the most immediate things is what is the actual problem here? So
Mm,
why is somebody coming to your product page, your website, whatever that entry point is? What was uncomfortable enough that they felt the need to go searching for that solution?
hmm
And so being clear about what the problem is, and then also being clear about all of the ways that you can help to solve that problem. So a lot of times people are much better at thinking surface level, but
mm,
they don't necessarily start to dig as deeply as they could or should to touch on some of those deeper human emotions that can be particularly influential for decision making. So, when you're thinking about a plate, like that's a really boring, basic product. There's
hmm
nothing revolutionary there.
right.
And so, if you're thinking that somebody purely needs a plate because they need something to eat on, there's not
hmm
that's not as deep as you could go. Maybe your plates are made of some special type of ceramic that's unbreakable, and so they're looking for plates that are going to be able to withstand the fact that they're moving every 6 months because they have a job that's constantly taking them to different places, and they have children, and so the unbreakable piece is so important to
Mm,
them. But then most unbreakable plates look really cheap and aren't pleasant to eat on, and so they want them to still be impressive when they have guests and family over, so that they can feel like they're eating on really great quality plates, even though they have that unbreakable piece to them. So that's just even scraping the surface. You could go even deeper than that, but continuing to figure out what is it beyond simply just the primary function that this item is serving.
Are there any questions you would ask yourself or research that you would do to kind of start figuring out what is that? It's not just that the plate is, unbreakable or kind of the next level down below that, they want to impress their friends with it, whatever. Like, what are you doing to kind of get in the person's head of the potential buyer?
So it really depends on the product, and some of that will depend upon your familiarity with the customers that you're trying to interact with. So sometimes your customers inside and out. Maybe you are your customer and you're creating
Mm,
that product that you always wanted and didn't exist. But there are plenty of other times when you're selling a product and you don't really know your customers all of that well. And so then you want to treat it really as you would with any other type of relationship, where you want to learn as much as you possibly can about those people. So not simply what they look like, but even what are their interests? What influencers do they follow on social media? And I think that one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of business owners make is they're scared to get specific about who their customers are. They just want to say, oh,
mm.
anybody that needs.
Everyone,
Right.
yes, the whole world, 7 billion
Right.
people.
Right. Because it's making a bold choice to
Mm,
say, this is who I'm selling to.
hmm
And it feels exclusionary. But
hmm
really, what that does is it allows you to start to go that extra bit deeper, because then you have a clear image of who you're selling to, rather than this hazy idea of potential customers between the ages of 20 and 80.
Right.
And then what's great about that is it also starts to make that sort of like fog of what to even write start to
Mm,
become a little bit more crystallized, because rather than trying to put words on a screen, you can start to think about who the customer is that's on the other side of that screen,
hmm
and the clear image that you can have of them. Then you're not just writing words down, but you're writing to them. You're thinking about what they care about. You're thinking about what other sorts of interests they might have that may not even directly relate to your product. Or like if you have a very specific niche and age group that you sell to, then there's going to be some unique slang perhaps that would be very suitable to them that may not be as relevant to a larger group, or technical language. So having that understanding isn't just giving you the feeling and the clarity of who you're writing to,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also helping to give you the pool of what words to pick and choose from.
Okay. That's a good way to look at it. So, all right. So now I kind of got this general idea of who our customer is. And I agree with you. We got to go deeper is to figure out who that customer avatar is. Because oftentimes it's kind of like when you take a rock and you throw it into a pond, as it ripples out, the bands get bigger. So I think actually, as opposed to saying I want the entire pond, if you throw it and to be specific, you're going to actually kind of ripple out from that like original dot, because people overlap and things of that nature. So more people will probably relate to a specific than they will to a generality.
And not only that, it 100% agree with that. But what happens is that if you have a very specific pool of people, then those are probably the people that have the most experience with this type of product
Mm,
and the highest demands. And so when you can get them really excited, then people that are a little bit interested in that topic or
mm,
wanting to explore maybe trying that out, whether it's something like, whenever I'm thinking about this, I always think about physical activity types of things. So like yoga or like backpacking backpack or hiking boots, those things that are quite technical. So you want to make sure that the people that are very serious about needing and wanting the best, if you really excite them, then all of those people that are thinking, I want to try out yoga and I don't really know that much about it, but I know that everybody that does yoga loves these mats, and they love these mats for all these reasons. And I really want to be somebody that loves yoga. And so I need the best if I'm going to give myself a shot at really trying this out. So that's how you can also start to appeal to
mm.
those wider ripples, even if they don't fall into that really narrowed down customer category.
Yeah, I've never heard it phrased that way, but that's such a good point, because there's kind of for lack of a better word, jaded, like, core consumer of whether it's yoga mats or people that fish or whatever, that the newbie maybe in plates, yoga mats, garlic presses, whatever, might just be more accepting of like, oh, okay, it looks like it works for what I need. Whereas the people that maybe like they do this, they press garlic all the time, or they're constantly doing yoga, they've developed their I like this, I don't like that, and like they're more nitpicky. And it takes a higher bar to get them excited about something. So if you focus on getting them excited, I could see how that would also ripple out to the people that are not quite as demanding. But that's a good thing that they're demanding,
Right.
because if you're able to serve them, now all of a sudden you're getting the wider audience. So how do we take that kind of mindset? Now we've kind of done our homework in the front end, and how do we put that into, like, let's say an Amazon listing?
Sure. So you have to think about a few different levels. So of course you have that customer and wanting to make sure that you're really communicating to all of those things that they want and need to know. But then you also have this thing called Amazon that you have
Right.
to be very
Very
mindful of.
specific how we do things.
Yeah. So everything from what you can and cannot say to how you have to structure things to, of course, one of the most important parts is the SEO. So making sure that you actually
Right.
have those keywords so that you're able to index properly and rank your product and get your product in front of eyeballs. Because if you're not doing that and running PPC, then you're going, no matter how beautiful your listing is, you can't convert people if they're not coming to your
Right.
page. So I always, for me, I take that for granted, but I know that not everybody does. So that's a really important piece that you want to be sure to be mindful of. But the other thing that I see a lot is that a lot of people that sell on Amazon are much more comfortable in the numbers realm of things. And so they look at the keywords and they say, okay, well, nobody reads anymore. So I can just kind of put some words around my most important keywords, and even if it doesn't look that great, doesn't matter,
Mm.
and that's good enough. And you may even do all right or even good, but you
Hmm.
can do better if you also weave in this copywriting component as well. So the best listings do what they need to do on those fundamental SEO side, while also making sure that they have a very clear understanding of who the customer is and how to communicate to them in a way that's effective. So that starts with your title, because when you're
Mm-hmm.
on the search results page, you have your main image and your title,
Mm-hmm.
your views and your price. There's really not that much information that you have to work with. And not only that, but Amazon is so competitive and there are so
Mm.
many products that look so similar. So that's really the point where you need to start differentiating yourself if you're going to have an opportunity to really stand out or just blend into all of the other ones. And what's great about that is, there's the decision paralysis. So when things are really similar, it can be very difficult
Mm.
to make a decision. And so a lot of people will just get stuck. And so since so many people's products look the same and do a lot of the same things, if you're able to find a way of spinning that a little bit or taking that extra step with your marketing,
Mm-hmm.
that can actually be enough of a differentiator that it helps make that decision much, much easier for customers. So with your title, you want to think about what is unique about your product that somebody needs to know so that they have enough information to click in because they understand that this is that product for them. So if we go back to something like the plates, that
Mm-hmm.
unbreakable piece is a really important part of it, because
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the main reasons that people are buying it. But you might be competing against brands like Corel, which are kind of plasticky feeling unbreakable
Mm-hmm.
plates. And so even though it may not be an important keyword, you may also want to add a word like, um, of course, I'm blanking on a good word at the moment. Luxury isn't necessarily how I would go with that, but something to,
Premium.
right, to connote this idea that this is, like, or ceramic like, or pot, I don't know, something that would help people to understand not just that it's unbreakable, but that there's something more about this that makes it better than the typical unbreakable plate. And if you're not adding that in your title, and particularly at the beginning of your title, not necessarily the first few words, but in the first 80 or so characters, then most likely people are not going to see that. And then you're missing that opportunity to get those clicks.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a very good point. Because at the end of the day, when that real estate is kind of like the shelf at the store. So that real estate of like when you do the search and you look up, plates or whatever, it's kind of like when you're going down the aisle, you're not looking at the back of the package to see all of their kind of like marketing words on the back of the package, or if you're in the grocery store, you're not looking at the nutritional information right away. You're looking at what catches your eye. It's got to be quick and punchy. Or when you're in the checkout line, and this is something I do nowadays more than I used to, is I look and see, sometimes we look at it as like trash magazines or whatever, where, what are the punchy little phrases they're throwing out there to get our attention? Because we have to get our attention quickly. And, when we're thinking about like an Amazon customer, they're scrolling through what, to your point, and it's an excellent point, all these products that look fairly similar. Maybe one has 4.4 star reviews, another one has 4.6, but to the customer it's 4.5. Does it really matter if one is 100 reviews or another one has 372? Like, they probably don't really care that much. So it's really, the image tells a story, but then the words on there. So that's a good point about, sometimes you got to be very particular about those words. So now that we go into the listing itself, now the customer clicks on your listing, what are the things you're doing, like in the bullets, for example?
So, first, it's worth talking about the character count itself, because I
Mm.
see that, fortunately, this trend seems to be going out of style. But for a long time, people saw, oh, I'm allowed up to 500 characters per bullet. So I want to make sure to take advantage of all 500
Right, right,
characters.
right. I'm going to give a whole story, a whole
Yeah.
paragraph.
Yeah. Luckily, I see that less and less. So that's a good positive trend
Right.
that people should. So I typically try to aim for roughly 200 characters per bullet. So that makes sure that you're going to be indexing for all your bullets, but also that you're keeping them very bite-sized, because you don't want to create these huge chunks of text that people are going to look at and say, "Oh, I don't want to
Yeah,
make the effort."
TLDR.
Yeah, exactly. So being mindful of that is really important. And then the other component is thinking about what are the 5 most important points that you need to make,
Mm,
and be very clear about that. And don't try to cram everything into your bullets. And I think that a lot of people assume that nobody looks at any other part of your listing. And first of all, what you see first is going to be dictated by the device that you're on. So if you're on mobile, then the description a lot of times appears first. You also have the photos, and
mm,
then you have the bullets. So it's not guaranteed that the bullets are even going to be the first part of text that people are reading when they get into your page.
hmm
So you don't need to cram everything there.
hmm
Instead, you want to think about what are the 5 most important points that I want to make, and then um, keep it focused on that. So a lot of times I'll be reading a bullet, and halfway through it'll start talking about 3 other things that are totally unrelated. And you could say, "Oh, well, what's the big deal about that?" But if I'm a customer and I'm skimming because I have some very specific buying criteria,
hmm
and then I see, okay, well, this bullet is about this, that's not what I need to know. So I'm going to go to the next one. Well, what if that second half with those random details were actually the things that they needed to know? So you're suddenly making it very difficult for them to find those pieces of information. Because,
hmm
of course, you have that psychology piece and understanding your customer, but you also have a lot of customers that have very specific buying criteria that are
mm.
totally feature based. And so you want to accommodate those kinds of customers as well and make it easy for them to find those pieces of information that they need.
Yeah, because there's that balance between having these, like, it's almost just keyword stuffing where people have, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like they're using every possible character they possibly can. And it's like some people's bullets are longer than most descriptions,
Yeah,
where it's just too much. But then on the flip side is, sometimes you see one where it's like 6 inch long. That's not
right.
using that space effectively. So to your point, about 200 characters, roughly the size of a tweet, is about um, the right mix there, because you don't want to go too long, but you also don't want to miss out on the opportunity there. So what are you then putting in the product description?
So the description is an opportunity to include that information that doesn't fit naturally into bullets. So
hmm
let's say that you sell some sort of topical product or a supplement or something. So you're going to have a list of ingredients, and some of those ingredients are going to be things that you're going to want to go into a little bit more depth with. And so the description is a great place to be able to make a short bulleted list of your top 3 or 5 ingredients that you want to give some additional information about, that it would read really clunky in the bullets, but in the description, using some very basic HTML tags, you can make it very readable and user friendly. Some
Mm,
other great things to incorporate into the description are even just other ways of looking at some of the 5 points here. You know, it sometimes a product is very basic and you think, oh my gosh, how can I write more than a couple of sentences about this product? But you can think about, well, what are the different things that people would be doing with this product? So are there other types of uses? And if you can't, if that's a difficult exercise for you to do, one of the great places that you can find some information about that is actually in your competitors' reviews. So you can
hmm
start to see, oh, okay, people are mentioning using it for this other thing that I would never have known. And it can also just in general give you some great insight into your customers and what they care about. Another tool that I like to use is social media for this purpose. So
Oh,
things
okay.
like
hmm
Instagram and YouTube, there are so many YouTube people that do product reviews on any type of niche imaginable, and they go into such fine detail and comparing it to things, and you can hear exactly what somebody cares about that you may not know if they weren't an enthusiast. So like
Right.
eyeshadows, I don't know how much you know about eyeshadow,
Very little.
but something that's very important about eyeshadow is, well, to a lot of people that just love the experience of putting makeup on, is the texture, and particularly having, as they call it, a buttery texture. So where it just, you put your finger on it and it just slides and it's so smooth, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not patchy, it's even pigment. And so you may not know that buttery is an adjective that you would use to describe eyeshadow. But if you watched even just a couple of short videos about products that they really like or don't like, then you can start to understand, oh, okay, that's something that I want to make sure to address when I'm writing about this product.
Yes, that's such a good point, because the words that the customer uses are important. So those enthusiasts, those kind of more jaded people that they're harder to impress, when we use their words, we're kind of speaking their language. And, the more we can speak their language, the more it sounds like we understand them. And so now all of a sudden that could be your competitive advantage over the other product that's just 6-inch whatever, or
Right.
that's just 2
A list
ounces
of
of,
colors.
yeah, or this X color, or whatever the case is. So now let's say we've got our listing taken care of here on Amazon. What do you suggest if we wanted to say, I want to build a larger brand in general? Like, what is that next thing we would potentially use with it?
So if you don't mind, I'd actually like to talk about one more part of the Amazon listing from the copy
Go
perspective that
for
I
it.
think gets overlooked a little bit, which is your images.
Hmm.
So your people, a lot of people are very visual shoppers. And whether they're the people that are just primarily looking at the photos, or somebody that's going through your listing with a fine tooth comb, the majority of customers are going to be looking at least a couple of pictures. And so using those pictures as an opportunity to drive home some of your key benefits, some of those emotional aspects that people will really connect to, is a
Hmm.
great way to make sure that you're taking advantage of the real estate that Amazon gives you. So not with your main image, but with your other images, and particularly with lifestyle images, it can be a great way to give that extra little nudge, as well as make sure that you're controlling the message, because you can have these really beautiful lifestyle images, but if you don't have any text there, then what you see in that photo may be completely different
Mm.
than what I see in that photo. So thinking about what is that takeaway message that you want to communicate with the image, and then creating a short little piece of text. I'm not talking about sentences here. I'm not talking about a bunch of bullets, even just a
Not
short
500
phrase.
characters.
No, no, you don't want to, people shouldn't have to zoom in to read
Right, to
what it
figure out what
is.
you're trying to say.
Right. It's more like a kind of like magazine ad sort of
Right,
thing.
right.
And how you can edit that into your images. It's something that I'm amazed by how many Amazon sellers, even very successful ones, are not utilizing that space well,
Hmm.
and it can really do some great things for your selling your products on Amazon. So.
Awesome, awesome. So all right, so now let's get into, I think you made a great point there about the images and things that you could be doing there, because some two people could be looking at the same image and get completely different something out of it. But if you just subtly kind of point their eye or their perception a certain way, that could have a big impact. So now let's say we're taking all this good information, we're taking it off Amazon, or just in general building our brand. What are some tips you would say now that we've kind of got this core thing on Amazon? What else are we able to do with this?
So you want to make sure first and foremost that you are maintaining consistency throughout. So probably if you're thinking, well, I actually shouldn't say probably. A lot of people, when they start their businesses on Amazon first, they neglect the brand piece. And that can make some extra work, or even put you into some challenging positions when you get to the place of wanting to expand to other channels. Because if
Hmm.
you're just choosing products because of opportunities to sell the products, you might think, okay, I want to have a Shopify store now, but I have this very weird collection of items that don't make any sense together. And so it's not that you can't overcome that, but it makes it a little bit trickier to do so. So being thoughtful at the beginning of the type of brand that you want to create can even help you to make the product selection choices that will set you up in a direction that will be easier to do that once you are ready. But I think what's also really important, and what we've seen in this whole time with COVID-19, is that Amazon, just having a business that's exclusively on Amazon, is a very vulnerable place to
Mm-hmm.
be. And so this idea of brand is important both for the ability to expand beyond Amazon, but the other component of that is the trust piece. And so we're also seeing both now and even before this pandemic that there were lots of stories about counterfeit goods and goods that don't meet certain safety criteria and all of that. And so people were starting to understand that they needed to do some homework about who they're purchasing from. And so what's the easiest and best way to do your homework? To go to Google, just type in the brand name, and you want to see a website. It's sort of weird to be buying a product that doesn't even, you can't find the brand anywhere else online besides Amazon. So
Mm-hmm.
even if you don't want to put a lot of effort into um, doing social media campaigns to drive traffic to your Shopify store, it would probably be worthwhile at the very least to have a landing page that people can find, so that you start to have some presence outside of Amazon. So it's not this stage 3 level practice to do. It's something that no matter where you are in your business, you want to be giving some thought to it. And then things to keep in mind are, first and foremost, making sure that you have a cohesive experience, so that whether somebody's looking at your website or looking at your Amazon listing or looking at your Facebook page, all of those things, that they're getting a cohesive and consistent message.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds kind of basic. However, I see all the time that the messaging is completely different. And I think that people, part of that may be trying to match what they're writing to the platform, rather than thinking about how they can adjust what they're saying while still maintaining that core. But it's also because a lot of times people haven't done the work to get really clear about who their brand is. And so then they're just writing these surface level words that don't have that clear vision that they're wanting to achieve, if that makes sense. That starts to get a little.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you mind giving an example of kind of what might be a cohesive look versus what might not be a cohesive look or feel?
So I suppose.
You don't have to throw any brands under the bus.
Well, funny enough, a lot of the big brands do a really poor job of this when they're
Mm,
transitioning onto Amazon, which I know we're talking about going off of Amazon, but I think it goes both
sure.
ways. And so a lot of times big brands, they're getting pressure to make sure that they're on Amazon. And so they throw something up, but they don't really know what it is that they are supposed to be saying or what rules they need to abide by. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, an example that I've used in some presentations that I've given is this CoverGirl mascara. And on their Amazon listing, it's just a bunch of random, it almost feels like they copied a bunch of different text from different campaigns that they ran, and then just put each one of those into a bullet point. And while that's on Amazon, you can see the same thing a lot of times elsewhere, where it's not necessarily that it doesn't match what it is that they're trying to say or how they want to represent their brand, but it's done sloppily.
Mm.
And how something looks and how it feels, and seeing that a company put time and effort into making something look good and sound good, says a lot. And it says more than what you may realize. Like, you may say, oh, a grammatical error doesn't really matter, but that just shows that you didn't take the time to have somebody else read it over and make sure that it was that it looked its best, and then you put it up there, and then you read it again just to make sure that it's in perfect condition.
Yeah, that's a good point, because just because you didn't see a red squiggly line doesn't mean that the red squiggly line didn't exist or it wasn't, grammatically incorrect just because your computer didn't catch it. It's a good idea to have someone else look at it. So, what would be the kind of biggest tip you would give to someone, other than cohesive look, of kind of like that next step when they're going, taking their brand off Amazon?
So being really clear about who your brand is and what you're trying to achieve with your brand. And so, like, if we were to talk about the unbreakable plates that I, for whatever reason, created
It
earlier in our
works.
conversation, if you feel like your brand identity is purely to make the best unbreakable plates,
Hmm.
I would say that you are not going far enough with that, because that's it's sort of like when you think about benefits and features. So a feature is just a description of what something is, and a
Hmm.
benefit is how it's really going to positively impact somebody. And so the same thing that you want to be doing when you're writing about your product, you need to be able to do about your brand. So saying, I want to make unbreakable plates because I want to help make one of the most stressful parts of life, which is moving, a painless experience. And how, one small piece of that is so that when you open the box with all of your kitchen stuff, you don't have a bunch of shards of plates all over the place. But then maybe if you're getting clear about that, then you realize, oh, well, if I'm trying to make that experience easier, maybe there are all these other things that I could be making as far as products or content that I could be creating that all speak to that larger goal that isn't so micro to the product itself.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good point. What is that bigger thing? Like you were saying before, like who's that kind of core enthusiast? Whether it's people that move a lot, whether it's people that have kids that they're tired of, plates breaking. Which my kids are a little older. My youngest is 5, so I wouldn't say they're old. But having been through that, where you lose some stuff along the way, it's not fun. So, all right.
I
So if
I break plates, so
we all do, we all
ages.
do. Yeah. I still cry over spilled milk in my 40s. So, I get it. So, all right. So if somebody wanted to follow you a little bit more or learn more from you, where would they go?
So they can please find me on marketingbyemma.com. I'm on
Hmm.
Facebook, facebook.com/marketingbyemma. Also, if you're feeling a little bit stumped about what kinds of questions you should be asking, we've put together a worksheet that you can use to help to start to know what questions you even need to ask. And then, so I'm going to give you the link in just a moment, but first, what I would also like to encourage you to do is that those are not the only questions that you should ask. In addition to getting curious about all of those questions, use those to really get curious about what other kinds of questions you should ask. And then every time you get an answer, try to go a little bit deeper. So try to say, why does that matter? And keep asking why. Because whether it's getting to know your customers or getting to know your brand or getting to know a new platform, the more that you can ask why and the deeper that you can push yourself to go, the more impactful the end result will be. So if you want that worksheet, it's marketingbyemma.com/Kevin.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I definitely recommend people go check that out. You've shared a lot of really good tips and knowledge, and I can definitely hear your passion for writing. And those of us that aren't necessarily great writers, myself included, I think definitely could benefit from that worksheet you just mentioned. So definitely head on over to marketingbyemma.com/Kevin to check that out. So really appreciate having you on Maximizing E-commerce and sharing your knowledge and bits of wisdom there about marketing, because I know for a lot of us, it's not necessarily our strong suit.
Happily. Thank you so much for having me. This was a great time. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. I love talking about this topic, and I'd be happy to chat.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Emma.
Thank you. Bye.